Welcome to Physiology Bites, everyone. My name is Ben, and today we're talking about smooth muscle. Now, smooth muscle is one of the most underappreciated cell types in the body. It just does not get the attention and love it deserves. If you look at a lot of textbooks, it will only usually dedicate a part or a fraction, a segment of a chapter to it. And it's a real shame because smooth muscle is a truly important tissue. And so let's talk about the basics of smooth muscle today. Let's give it the love and attention it very much deserves. So when we look at smooth muscle in its relaxed state, you can see that it's this elongated cell with a single nucleus. All right, nothing too remarkable about it when you compare it to other cells. What makes smooth muscle interesting and different to other cell types is that it can contract. It can move from this relaxed, elongated state into this bunched up, contracted state. And when it bunched up like this, okay, what it does is it changes the dimensions, it changes the width or height that it takes up in a tissue. So when you think of, say, a blood vessel or something in your gastrointestinal tract, if you have thousands of these smooth muscle cells, which you do, and they contract, it's going to change how much space is left within the hollow organ. All right. So by the smooth muscle contracting, it changes how much space there is left in the hollow organ. And I'll give you an example soon of why that's so important. An important note before I talk about why this process occurs is that smooth muscle cell contraction is involuntary. You can't directly control it. You can't sit there and think, I'm going to contract my smooth muscles in the small intestine. It won't work. All right, as hard as you try. Okay, so this smooth muscle contraction is governed by involuntary processes. It's not something you can voluntarily activate. All right, so let's talk about why that smooth muscle contracts now. If we look at if we zoom in on our relaxed muscle, what we see is those red dots are what we call the dense bodies, and those red lines that connect those dense bodies are intermediate filaments. And this provides the scaffolding, the basic shape, and the basic structural integrity for our smooth muscle. But they're not actually the things which cause contraction. The things which cause contraction are our thick and our thin filaments. Now, thick filaments are made of myosin with these globular heads. And what's going to happen is those globular heads are going to bind to the thin filament, the actin on the thin filament to be specific. And when they do that, a power stroke occurs. And that power stroke physically moves the thin filament in, for example, this direction. Now, if you think to yourself, well, if you look at your thick and thin filaments here, if these thin filaments are moved in this direction, okay, so from right to left, it's going to move those dense bodies closer together. And you can see that's what happens in a contracted smooth muscle. So the thin filaments passing by the thick filaments, which we call the sliding filament theory, okay, similar to the same as other types of muscle, basically, all right, is what causes this contracted smooth muscle. The dense bodies and intermediate filaments simply support that. And this is all due to calcium influx. How that calcium influx occurs can be due to a bunch of different reasons. Okay, it can be electrical, it can be hormonal. Other chemicals can cause calcium to come in and eventually cause this process. But it is always this process. Myosin heads grab onto actin and we have the sliding filament theory. And that causes our relaxed smooth muscle to become this contracted smooth muscle. Now, where that's useful is you might think to yourself, well, what's this mean? If we look at a blood vessel, you can see the blood vessel has this is an artery in this case, it has this nice thick lining of smooth muscle. Now, when it's relaxed, it means that this lining doesn't take up much space and there's a lot of space for blood to flow through the artery. When those smooth muscles contract, when those smooth muscle cells contract, for example, what's going to happen is that now each one of these smooth muscle cells is wider. And now that smooth muscle layer takes up more space. So you can see there's now less space for blood to flow through. We call this the lumen of the blood vessel. So the lumen becomes smaller, basically because we've contracted all of our smooth muscle cells. And this is a way which we help change resistance in our blood vessels and change our blood flow is by activating this smooth muscle. All right, everyone, that's one example that's all over in the body. So your gastrointestinal tract, your reproductive system, your urinary tract, your eyes, all these different parts of your body, your sweat glands, okay, everywhere has this kind of smooth muscles or modification of smooth muscles. Incredibly important. All right, so make sure you understand how that basic process of contraction occurs and why it matters. All right, bye, everyone.